microwave remote sensing. Although the course is based on the synthetic aperture radar, however, we have to start discussion from the microwave remote sensing because synthetic aperture radar is basically a part of microwave remote sensing. If we classify the remote sensing based on the regions of the electromagnetic spectrum in use, it can be classified into three broad categories. One is the optical remote sensing, that is performed within the optical region of the electromagnetic spectrum, that is from 0.3 to 3.0 micrometer wavelength. Then we have thermal remote sensing, that uses thermal region of the electromagnetic spectrum within 0.3 micrometer to 1 millimeter wavelength. And then we have the microwave remote sensing that uses wavelength range from 1 millimeter to 1 meter of the electromagnetic spectrum. And as we can understand that microwave remote sensing uses longer wavelengths. Why do we go for microwave remote sensing? The first advantage of microwave remote sensing is it is not affected by the atmosphere. That means atmospheric particles or water vapor or cloud or even light rains can be penetrated by microwave energy. Therefore, in all weather conditions, we can capture the imagery. Further, since it can be conducted in the passive mode as well as active mode, that means we can use the natural source of energy or even we can use the artificial source of energy. Therefore, active microwave remote sensing can be performed day or night. Active microwave remote sensing is operated from both of the platforms, aerial and satellite. However, passive microwave remote sensing is generally performed from the space. Passive microwave remote sensing is primarily used by the meteorologists. Now let us try to see the basic classification of microwave remote sensing. In case of microwave remote sensing, it can be classified into two broad categories. First is the passive microwave remote sensing that uses natural source of electromagnetic energy, in which we have microwave radiometer and even we have the scatterometers. And another category is the active microwave remote sensing that uses its own electromagnetic energy. That means the platform itself will throw the energy towards the target. Target means the earth surface. So the platform itself will throw the energy towards the earth surface, and then the backscattered or reflected energy will be recorded by the sensor. In case of optical remote sensing, we use the term reflected, means the energy that bounces back from the earth surface. However, in case of microwave remote sensing, instead of reflection, we say this one as backscatter. So the backscattered energy will be recorded by the sensor, and we have imaging sensors and non-imaging sensors. In case of non-imaging sensors, we have the scatterometers, also we have the altimeters. However, we are not going to discuss these sensors. So we are primarily concerned about the imaging sensors, and in imaging we have radar, radio detection and ranging. The radar may also be classified further as real aperture radar and synthetic aperture radar. Synthetic aperture radar also has several subdivisions, but right now we are not going to discuss the classification of the synthetic aperture radar. Rather, we shall focus on this tomorrow or in day 2 class. So now let us start our discussion on radio detection and ranging radar. What are the devices or components associated with a radar sensor? We have the transmitter that is used to transmit the electromagnetic energy towards the Earth's surface. Then we have the receiver that receives the energy backscattered from the Earth's surface. Radar antenna is required to throw the energy or to receive the energy. We may use two antennas, one for sending the energy and one for receiving the energy. However, most of the modern spaceborne radar remote sensing sensors carry only a single antenna, and this antenna can be used for sending the energy and also to receive the energy. If we use two antennas, then while throwing the energy, then the antenna is called directional antenna. I mean, the antenna that is throwing the energy towards the Earth's surface is called the directional antenna, and the antenna that is receiving the energy is called receive antenna. However, as I told you that nowadays a single antenna is being used as directional as well as receive antenna, and duplexer is a device that coordinates when the microwave energy is generated and received. Actually, duplexer is the device that helps us to use a single antenna for throwing the energy as well as to receive the energy. That means when we are throwing the energy, the duplexer will coordinate everything, and duplexer will also coordinate when the energy is being received by the antenna. So duplexer, what does duplexer perform? Duplexer actually uh, coordinates when the microwave energy is transmitted and received. So a single antenna with the help of duplexer can be used to throw the energy as well as to receive the energy. We also need a recording device, hard disk or something, to store the image that is being captured by the radar system. Now, let us start our discussion about radar image. Brightness of features in a radar image is usually a combination of several variables, and these variables can be grouped into two broad categories: system parameters and terrain parameters. Today we shall primarily concentrate on the system parameters, and in day 2 we shall discuss the terrain parameters. Now see, we are directly coming to the radar image and the brightness. Why? Because we believe that this bottom up approach of learning will help us to understand the radar concept better. Therefore, before discussing the radar system or the imaging concept or the functioning of the radar, we are directly coming to the point of radar image, and eventually the system will also be discussed. We have to understand that there is a basic difference with the radar, basic difference in between radar and the optical remote sensing. In case of optical remote sensing, the brightness of the pixel primarily depends on a single variable. This variable is actually the amount of light reflected back by the Earth surface feature. The amount of light reflected back by the Earth surface feature. So this is a single variable based on which the brightness of the pixel is determined in the optical remote sensing. However, the brightness of a pixel depends on several many factors. At least 8 variables are there in case of radar image. Therefore, interpreting the radar image and extraction of information from the radar image is rather much more complicated, and it is not only complicated in many uh, uh, instances. Some of the features that we expect uh, cannot be obtained from the radar image. We have to understand that radar remote sensing or the synthetic aperture radar remote sensing is not replacing the optical remote sensing. They are not supplementary. They are actually complementary. Some of the things that we cannot get from the optical remote sensing, and we can get them in the SAR remote sensing. And some of the things that we obtain in the SAR remote sensing are not available in the optical remote sensing. So they are actually complementary. They do not supplement each other. Now in the system parameter, we have several variables: frequency or wavelength, polarization, viewing geometry, spatial resolution, speckle, and in the terrain parameters we have surface geometry, surface roughness, and dielectric properties. Remember that pixel value will depend on all of these 8 variables. Now let us start discussion on each of these variables. First is the frequency or wavelength. And as you can see in this slide, different regions of the microwave energy have been named with different names, from the shorter wavelength to the longer wavelength. We have the K band, X band, C band, S band, L band, and P band. Among them, the K band, since it has very shorter wavelength, K band is primarily used for experimental purposes, for meteorological applications, and if we want to use the K band in synthetic aperture radar, then the sensor must be carried on aeroplanes, not on satellites. Since atmosphere will interfere with the shorter wavelength, and if the energy comes from a very high altitude, then it requires to travel a very long distance through the air, and because of the atmospheric interference, the energy will be modified. Therefore, K band cannot be used from the satellite platform if we want to use it in synthetic aperture radar. Airborne sensors can throw the K band and can receive the K band. However, from the space, we are using X band, C band, S band, and even L band. We generally do not use the P band because it has very longer wavelength, and because of longer wavelength, the spatial resolution will become coarser. We shall discuss this issue, I mean this spatial resolution issue later, and then you will understand that why we do not use the P band. However, P band may be very useful for biomass estimation, for forest applications, and let us discuss the applications in the next slide. Okay, next applications I will discuss later. Before that, let us try to understand the influence of wavelength or frequency on the image brightness value. See, the longer wavelengths have the capability to penetrate earth surface features, some of the earth surface features such as vegetation canopy or the dry soil, and rough surface. If the surface is rough, it scatters more energy towards the sensor. Therefore, rough surface will appear brighter on the radar imagery. Now, which surface is rough or which one is smooth, that actually depends on the wavelength of the microwave energy. For example, if I am using 20 centimeter wavelength, then objects smaller than 20 centimeter, if we have variations on the terrain smaller than 20 centimeter, then it will not be recognized by the energy and the surface will appear as smooth. But if the terrain variation is more than 20 centimeter, then this will appear as rough surface for the 20 centimeter wavelength. That means the surface roughness is not constant. It actually again depends on the wavelength. As you can see in this slide, in the C band image, the image appears comparatively rough in comparison to the L band, and if we consider the L band image, it is smoother than the C band image. Why? Because the wavelength is longer in L band in comparison to the C band. Now in this slide, let us see the X band, then the space-borne search systems that are using the X band and typical applications. So X band is sensitive to the surface roughness since it has shorter wavelength. High resolution applications, topographic mapping, flood mapping. The C band, it can be used to identify ocean features, ship detection, sea ice, oil spill detection. Then comes the S band, that can also be used for ship detection, sea ice, oil spill detection, flood mapping, forestry mapping, crop classification. Then comes the L band. L band is used for forestry mapping and typing, environmental monitoring, agricultural monitoring, geological applications, hydrological applications. And as I told you, P band is primarily used for the estimation of biomass, for forest typing, for forest identification, forest damage identification. So all these kinds of applications, because P band has very long wavelength, and therefore it can penetrate the forest, and while penetrating the forest, some interactions will be happen within the forest. We shall discuss it later, and then the energy will be modified, and this modified energy will be recorded, and therefore for the forest applications or for different biomass applications, the P band is very useful, but it has coarser spatial resolution. Therefore for other mapping purposes or land cover map identification purposes, or for the urban applications, this P band cannot be used. Next parameter on which the pixel brightness depends is the polarization. What does it mean by polarization? Polarization means actually orientation of the electric field of the electromagnetic energy. As we know that in the electromagnetic energy, we have two fluctuating fields perpendicular to each other. One is the magnetic field and another is the electric field. Now the electric field may be kept in horizontal mode or even in vertical mode. If we keep the electric field in the horizontal direction, then it is called horizontally polarized energy. And if the electric field is in vertical direction, then it is called vertically polarized energy. Other than this horizontal polarization and vertical polarization, we also have circular polarization, and till date only one satellite that is using this circular polarization is the Indian RISAT-1, and we shall discuss the circular polarization later. But before that, let us try to understand the basic concept of polarization. Circular polarization will be discussed later. Now, the polarization, why do we use polarized energy in radar? Because the artificial source of light or artificial source of energy that we are using is not a very powerful source like the sun. Therefore, as you know that from the sun, when the energy is coming, it scatters in all of the directions. I mean, all possible polarizations are present there. But the source, the energy source that we are using is not powerful like the sun. Therefore, we need to throw the energy in a specific polarization to increase the power. Then that means if we throw all of the energies in a specific direction or specific polarization, then the power of energy will be higher. And with less amount of battery or in expense of less amount of battery, we will be able to generate more power. Now, the energy can be thrown in horizontal direction or the electrical field may be kept in horizontal direction or in vertical direction. So, the energy can be thrown in horizontal polarization or in vertical polarization. So, you have to understand that all of the radar sensors are throwing the energy in a specific polarization to increase the power and to preserve the battery. Now, we have to understand that when we are throwing a specific polarized energy, this energy once hits the target, then Earth surface features may alter the polarization of the energy. That means if we throw horizontally polarized energy towards the terrain, the Earth surface feature may alter it, and this horizontally polarized energy may be converted into vertically polarized energy. Whether this depolarization, I mean changing the polarization, is called depolarization. Whether this depolarization will happen or not, that will depend on the Earth surface features. Some of the features are altering the polarization and some of the features are not altering. Now, while receiving the energy, then also we can receive a specific polarized energy. That means we are sending horizontally polarized energy and we are also receiving horizontally polarized energy. We are not receiving the vertically polarized energy. Similarly, we may send it vertically and receive it vertically. So, these two polarizations HH and VV, horizontal send, horizontal receive, and vertical send, vertical receive, are called like polarization. Even we may go for horizontal receive and horizontal send and vertical receive, or vertical send and horizontal receive. These two, HV and VH, are called cross polarization. Some of the features appear brighter in like polarization and some of the features appear brighter in the cross polarization. If we have the knowledge of Earth surface features, whether they depolarize the energy or not, based on this understanding, we can even identify the Earth surface based on the brightness appearances on the image. Now, as I was discussing the depolarization, when the energy hits the Earth surface features, in some of the instances depolarization happens, and the amount of depolarization will depend on the type of the surface. Some of the Earth surface features do not cause significant depolarization. Normally, normal scattering and normal Earth surface features do not cause significant depolarization. However, volume scattering cause very high depolarization. What is volume scattering? We don't know at this point of discussion. However, it is a very important thing and definitely we shall discuss it in day 2. Now, different polarized energy, as you can see in this slide. The first image is the HH polarization, second one is the VV polarization, and third one we have the HV polarization. And as you can notice that some of the features are brighter in the like polarized energy, even in HH or in VV, and some of the features are brighter in the cross polarized image. And even we can generate color composites by using these different polarized images. As in the fourth image, you can see that this color composite has been generated by these 3 images HH, VV and HV. Viewing geometry of radar is rather very much complex. Normally, optical remote sensing or optical remote sensors look directly at the nadir, and we know that if the sensor looks towards the nadir, then only we can get the highest geometric quality. If it looks off the nadir, then there is a huge scale distortion throughout the image in case of optical remote sensing. But in case of radar remote sensing, the sensor always looks off the nadir. It cannot capture any image directly looking towards the nadir. Why? We shall discuss it later, and mathematically it can be proved that if the sensor looks towards the nadir, then there will be no image at our disposal. So radar always looks off the nadir, and in this figure, in this animated figure, we shall try to explain the entire viewing geometry of the radar, and consider this animated representation as a 3-dimensional figure in which this is one direction, flight direction, this is another direction perpendicular to the flight direction, and this is the z direction, height. Now, as you can see, as the flight moves forward, it scans a specific portion of the Earth's surface, and this portion is called the swath. And this radar always, as I told you, always looks off the nadir. Now, if we draw a perpendicular line from the sensor to the Earth's surface, the point at which the line touches the Earth's surface is called the nadir point. It is actually the point on the Earth's surface that is directly beneath of the sensor. So this is the nadir point, and as you can see that the system is looking off the nadir. The flight direction is called the azimuth direction, and the perpendicular to the flight direction is called the range direction. This is called near range, and this is the far range. And we shall also have several intermediate ranges throughout the swath. This is called look angle at the near range, and similarly we shall also have another look angle at the far range and several intermediate look angles. This is the look angle at the far range. If we draw a line perpendicular to the line that was drawn to determine the nadir, then it will form a line like this. This is the line, and we are drawing a line in the sky with 90-degree angle. Then this particular angle is called the depression angle, and this is the depression angle at the far range. Similarly, a depression angle will also be there for the near range. Several intermediate depression angles will also be there. For example, for this point, for this point, for this point, for this point, several angles will be there. Now, if we draw a normal from any point along on the swath, the angle in between this in between this normal and the beam is called the incidence angle. So, this is the incidence angle at the far range. Similarly, incidence angle will also be there at the near range. This is called the slant range distance, and it is slant range distance at the far range. This is very important thing in radar because images are created in the slant range plane. On this plane, images will be created. We shall discuss it later. Now, this is the slant range distance at the far range, and this is the slant range distance at the near range. This is called ground range distance. It is at far range, and similarly ground range distance at the near range. Several intermediate ground range distances will also be there. Now, the amount of backscatter will be higher at the near range and it will be lower at the far range. I mean, the amount of energy that is being reflected by the terrain will be higher at the near range and lower at the far range. So, this is a cross section, as you can see. This is the sensor and this is the nadir point. So, the sensor looks off the nadir. Here we have the target. This is the look angle and this is the depression angle, and this is the incidence angle. Here we also have another angle that is called grazing angle. However, we do not use this term in most of the instances. Now, see, if the terrain is flat, in that case the look angle and the incidence angle will be constant. It will be same. But if we have sloped terrain like this or a terrain like this, then this angle will be, let me erase all these things, otherwise you won't be able to understand. So, now see, if we have a terrain like this, then if we draw a normal to this surface, so this is the normal and then this is the incidence angle, and in this case the look angle and the incidence angle are not same. This is one important thing we have to understand, because the images are necessary to be terrain corrected in consideration of this incidence angle. So, local angle or local incidence angle is required for some of the corrections of SAR image. on spatial resolution. The image brightness will depend on the spatial resolution of the object. First, spatial resolution of radar. The concept of spatial resolution of radar is completely different than the optical remote sensing. Don't confuse the optical resolution, optical remote sensing spatial resolution concept with the SAR. SAR has two different spatial resolutions for each pixel. In the azimuth direction, there is the flight direction, and along the range direction. And the spatial resolution, the concept of spatial resolution will be different for the real aperture radar and synthetic aperture radar. See, although our course is based on the synthetic aperture radar, but we have to understand the real aperture radar also, because if we do not understand the real aperture radar, then understanding of synthetic aperture radar is not possible. However, we have to understand that real aperture radar is the initial concept of the radar, and currently it is not being used in none of the cases. It is not being used in any of the cases. So, whatever the radar systems, imaging radar systems currently we have, all are synthetic aperture radar, because synthetic aperture radar has several. However, while discussing the spatial resolution, we shall discuss them one by one. The spatial resolution, to discuss the spatial, we have to understand the principle of real aperture radar. So, how the real aperture radar captures imagery? As you can see, we have a radar antenna over here, and this swath is perhaps going to be captured by the radar. So, the radar throws the beam and it progresses forward, then throws another beam. These are called pulses. So, in each pulse, it will create one beam, and several pulses will be generated continuously, and we shall have several beams. We have to understand that there is a basic difference in between the visible light and the microwave light. In physics, microwave is also called light. Now, what is the difference? In case of visible light, it is a stream flow. Continuously the light is flowing and it is coming. But in case of radar or in case of microwave energy, imaging radar, the energy cannot be thrown continuously. Rather, radar pulses are generated. What is a pulse? Pulse is basically outburst of energy. So, we are bursting the energy, then remains a gap, time gap, then another burst, then another burst, and then another burst, and like this. It is not a continuous flow of light. Now, as you can see, the flight is moving in this direction. This is the perpendicular line from the sensor towards the earth surface, and this is the nadir point. So, this is the azimuth, that means this is the azimuth direction, and perpendicular to the azimuth direction is the range direction. This is the near range, this is the far range, and although the beam width is much wider, but ultimately these areas will not be scanned, or these areas will not be illuminated. Therefore, the image swath, actual image swath will be much narrower than the actual beam width. Now let us try to understand range resolution of real aperture radar and synthetic aperture radar. Range resolution, as I told you that for radar, for example, this is the pixel and this is the azimuth direction and this is the range direction. The pixel size will be rectangular, not square as you have seen in optical remote sensing, because in optical remote sensing it focuses at a solid cone like circle. So a circle can be best represented by a square, but in our case the spatial resolution is not same in both of the directions. Therefore we shall have rectangular pixels instead of square pixel, and the size of the pixel in this direction and the size of the pixel in this direction will be different. However, the images are processed to generate the square image, that is also comes under the purview of the SAR image processing. Now let us try to understand the range resolution. Range resolution means the resolution, the spatial resolution towards the range. And see, in this figure, assume this one as the front view. As you can see, the flight is moving towards the viewer. So this is the flight and this is the nadir point, and the sensor is looking off the nadir, and the spatial resolution in the range direction is dependent on the pulse length. What is the pulse length? Pulse length is the duration or the time gap in between two successive pulses or two successive outbursts of energy. Now, the spatial resolution along the range direction is dependent on the pulse length, or more specifically, it is actually pulse length divided by 2. Now, as you know that pulse is measured in terms of time, but if we multiply the time with the speed of light, we can get the pulse length instead of pulse duration. So, if we multiply the pulse duration with the speed of light, then we can get pulse length. Now, the spatial resolution in the range direction is actually half of the pulse length. And as you can see, here we have two objects, this is object A and this is object B. And this object A and object B has a distance or has a separating distance that is smaller than half of the pulse length. Therefore, on the radar imagery, we won't be able to discriminate them. However, the distance in between the object X and object Y is wider or longer than the half of the pulse length. Therefore, they would be identified on the imagery clearly. So, this is the basic concept of spatial resolution in the range direction. We have to understand that the range resolution, the concept of range resolution is actually same for the real aperture radar and the synthetic aperture radar. I mean, in this case, there is no difference. Now see one very important thing, that if the range resolution is dependent on the half of the pulse length, that means whatever the height or wherever we put the sensor, it does not matter. In case of optical remote sensing, as you know, that if we place the sensor at very high altitude, the spatial resolution becomes coarser because it looks at a solid angle like this. And see, if my terrain is over here, then there will be a higher spatial resolution. If my terrain is over here, then I will have rather coarser spatial resolution. But in case of synthetic aperture radar, the range resolution at least does not depend on the altitude of the sensor. Rather, it depends on the half of the pulse length. Therefore, whether we place it on aeroplane or on the satellite, it does not matter. We can obtain very high spatial resolution. Next is ground range versus slant range. Now, in case of optical remote sensing, the images are formed on the image plane, and the image plane actually represents the ground plane, the ground range plane. But in case of radar, the images will be formed on the slant range plane. That means on this plane it will be generated, not on the ground range plane. Now, in case of slant range image, the spatial resolution at the near range and the spatial resolution at the far range will be constant, same, there will be no difference. That means whether the object is nearer to the sensor or the object is further from the sensor, they will have same spatial resolution, at least on the slant range plane. But this has a problem, because my object is not on the slant range plane, objects are on the ground range plane rather. Now, which ground area is being represented on the slant range plane, that is very important for us. So, if we draw the pulses, then you can understand that at the near range, a larger area or a larger distance is being represented by half of the pulse length, whereas at the far range, comparatively a smaller distance is being represented by half of the pulse length. So, although half of the pulse length is constant or the pulse length is constant, but on the ground plane, the objects that are being represented by the radar image will have differences. It will represent a larger area or larger distance at the near range in a pixel and a shorter distance at the far range in a pixel. Therefore, on the imagery at the near range we shall have coarser spatial resolution, and at the far range we shall have finer spatial resolution. And because of this problem, the images become distorted. Why? As you can see, this was the total ground that was necessary to be represented, but the image that we are getting is of this much length. That means on the image, ground objects have been shortened. Therefore, on the radar imagery, the ground surface objects will be shortened, and it is again a part of the SAR processing, SAR image processing, to convert this slant range image into the ground range image. Okay. So next is in this image, as you can see, this is the slant range image. This is the slant range image and this is the ground range image. And as you can see, the distortion is rather less at the far range. But if we come to the near range, we have a huge distortion. Can you see? And the image became shorter in comparison to the ground area it is being represented. So it is also a part of SAR image processing in which we convert the slant range image into the ground range image. Now, how can we get the ground range image? This is a very simple formula by which we can determine the ground range from the slant range distance and height of the platform. Now, we shall discuss range resolution of real aperture radar and synthetic aperture radar in summary. First, see the slant range resolution is constant, that is C by P, Cp divided by 2. And now if we consider the ground range resolution, the ground range resolution is necessary to be converted with this formula, and this is the ground range resolution. Now see, come back to the previous equation, and as you can see, this is the starting point of the image, I mean farthest point. Then see, at this point they are almost similar, at this point we have some variation, and in this point we have this much of variation. So the variation is continuously increasing as we go towards the near range. Now see, range resolution ultimately, if we consider this formula, again is not dependent on the height, it depends on the pulse length. And here theta, what is the theta? Theta is basically the depression angle, this is the angle. So since the ground range or range resolution is independent of height, then we have the freedom to place the radar anywhere. Now, how can we get higher spatial resolution? If we can reduce the pulse length, or if we can reduce the gap in between two successive pulses, then we can obtain higher spatial resolution. But if we want to decrease the gap or pulse duration, then we have to use wider beam width, because only wider beam widths can provide shorter pulse length. Now, wider, if we want to use wider beam width, then definitely we have to use shorter wavelength. For the longer wavelengths, we cannot use wider bandwidth. So if we cannot use wider bandwidth, then we cannot obtain higher spatial resolution, because the pulse length is dependent on the bandwidth. Wider bandwidth provides better pulse length. Now, wider bandwidth can be obtained if we shorter the wavelength. Now, shorter wavelength is not always desired. Why? Because shorter wavelengths will be affected by the atmospheric particles, clouds, water vapors. Therefore, we cannot reduce the pulse length as much as we want, rather a balance is maintained. Now we shall discuss the azimuth resolution. Azimuth resolution is different for the real aperture radar and synthetic aperture radar. First, let us try to understand the real aperture radar, and then we shall discuss the azimuth resolution of synthetic aperture radar. In real aperture radar, azimuth resolution depends on the beam width. As you can see, here we have the beam, and this is the entire microwave beam. This is in near range and this is at the far range. So whatever comes within this beam cannot be discriminated individually. As you can see, X and Y, these two objects are coming within the beam width, therefore we won't be able to discriminate them. However, objects A and B are separated by a distance that is wider than the beam width, therefore we could be able to identify them or discriminate them on the radar imagery. Now see, the beam width is narrower at the near range and wider at the far range. Here we have the beam width, this is narrower at the near range and this is wider at the far range. That means the spatial resolution will vary across the swath. So at the near range of the swath, we shall have higher spatial resolution since the beam width is narrower, and at the far range, the spatial resolution will be coarser since the beam width is wider. So this is a problem with the real aperture radar. However, in case of synthetic aperture radar, this problem will not be there. We shall discuss it later. Now, what is the formula to determine the azimuth resolution in real aperture radar? It depends on the slant range distance SR and beta beam width. So it is a product of slant range distance and the beam width. That means if the slant range distance increases, then the spatial resolution will be decreased or the coarser spatial resolution we can get. Therefore, it is dependent on the height. Let us come back to the previous image. Now see, if we increase the altitude, then the slant range distance will also be increased, and as a result the spatial resolution will be decreased. That means the azimuth resolution of real aperture radar is dependent on the height, and that is the reason why we do not use real aperture radar from the satellites. Rather, we use them from the aeroplanes. Although nowadays real aperture radar is obsolete, and in all of the instances we are using the synthetic aperture radar because of its several advantages. Now, higher azimuth resolution we can obtain in at the near range, and at the far range it will be rather coarser. We have already discussed this, and beam width is actually directly proportional to the antenna length. That means beam width is directly proportional to the wavelength and inversely proportional to the antenna length. Now, beam width is directly proportional to the wavelength. What does it mean? It means that if we use shorter wavelength, then we can have narrower beam width and the spatial resolution will be increased. As I told you that we generally do not use the P band because it has very long wavelength, near about 1 meter, and if we use longer wavelength, then the beam width will be wider, and because of wider beam width we shall have coarser spatial resolution. And beam width is inversely proportional to the wavelength, because this is the formula. So beam width can be obtained by beam width can be obtained by dividing the lambda with the antenna length. And in this formula, as you can see, if the upper value becomes smaller, then the beam width becomes narrower, or if we increase the antenna length or L, then the beam width will be narrower and we can obtain higher spatial resolution. Now the problem is, we cannot use very long antenna. We have some restrictions. Therefore, if we use a very long antenna on an aircraft or on a satellite, it will be impractical. And the azimuth resolution of real aperture radar can also be defined with this formula: lambda divided by L multiplied by slant range distance. Since in this formula we are replacing the beta with this one, lambda divided by L. So it is basically the azimuth resolution. Now from this equation, it is clear to you that if we increase the platform height, then the spatial resolution will become coarser. It will have a larger size. So we generally want to explore the Earth's surface from a very high altitude. Why? Because if we increase the altitude, then the ground coverage increases. A sensor can cover a greater ground area. Therefore, increasing the height is a desired phenomena. Further, we cannot go for very shorter wavelength, because if we go for very shorter wavelength, then the energy will be affected by the atmosphere. So the only option we have is increasing the antenna length. But as I told you that it is impractical. I have given one example over here. As you can see, that we need 1 kilometer long antenna in order to obtain 25 meter spatial resolution with L band. L band means 25 centimeter wavelength, and just 100 kilometer distance from the target. Now imagine 1 kilometer long antenna on an aircraft or on a satellite, or even larger than this 1 kilometer length. That means real aperture radar cannot be used from lower height. Rather, we have cannot be used for very high altitude. Rather, we have to use it from lower altitudes. Now, before going to discuss synthetic aperture radar, I shall show you a video, and through this video I will try to explain what does it mean by synthetic aperture. First of all, aperture. What is aperture? Aperture means opening. In case of optical remote sensing, lens is the aperture through which the light passes, and in case of radar, the receive antenna and directional antenna, these antennas are basically aperture. So if we use longer antenna, then we can obtain very high spatial resolution along the azimuth direction. But as we have already discussed, that installing a very large antenna is practically impossible. Therefore, we found, or we tried to find, a different approach in which a smaller antenna will be used, but with this concept, a synthetic larger antenna will be generated, or rather artificially we shall generate a larger antenna by using a physical smaller antenna. This is the basic concept of synthetic aperture radar. That means we are increasing the aperture length or the antenna length by using some artificial technique. However, the physical size of the antenna is rather smaller. So, synthetic aperture radar, as we have discussed, that synthetic aperture radar can be placed at a very high altitude, and let us try to see this video. At about 500 kilometers, TerraSAR X was placed. And this radar remote sensing can be conceptualized or can be understood better if we consider a bat. Actually, in case of radar, what do we measure? We measure distances. As you may find in the name, we have radio detection and ranging. Range means distance. So, in each and every case, we are measuring the distances, and based on the distances, the spatial locations will be determined. As you know that a bat, throws a bat throws ultrasound towards the target, and when the ultrasound returns back, then bat understands that how far the object is from him. So, the same concept has been implemented in the microwave remote sensing or in the radar. However, in this case, instead of ultrasound, we are using microwave energy, and the concept is same. The bat throws pulses of ultrasound, and in this case, in our case, we are throwing pulses of microwave energy. They are not continuous flow, rather they are basically outbursts with some time gaps. Bat throws ultrasound, but our radar sensors throw microwave energy, but in the same manner like pulses. Once, see, there is a disturbance. See, once the radar beam hits the target, the pulse is splitted into several scattered beams. I mean, a single beam will be splitted into multiple beams. Some of these splitted or backscattered beams will come towards the sensor, and some of these splitted beams will go outside of the vicinity of the sensor. Now, in this picture, as you can see, these red circles are going outside of the view of the sensor, and these blue circles are coming back towards the sensor. Let us try to look at this from another angle. Now see, when the radar beam is coming or the energy is coming towards the earth's surface, then from this point the reflection starts or backscatter starts, and continuously this incoming beam will be splitted into multiple beams, and this multiple beams will ultimately, some of the beams will be targeted towards the sensor and some of the beams will go outside of the sensor vicinity. Now let us try to understand that when it is throwing the energy is coming towards the earth's surface. Now the same antenna is also receiving the energy. Now when the antenna is receiving the energy, what it hears? It is throwing one energy, then it is receiving one pulse, then another one beam, then another beam, then another beam, then another beam. That means for a single pulse or single beam, it will receive multiple backscatters, and if these backscatters come continuously, then the sensor will not have any instrumentation to differentiate them. For example, if continuous sounds are coming from a source towards our ear, then we generally do not understand or do not discriminate those sounds. So continuous sound is coming, and how it hears by the antenna, try to understand with the sound. So multiple backscatters are going towards the sensor, and if continuous backscatters are going towards the sensor, then sensor will hear a constant sound. And it won't be able to differentiate them. Which one is coming from the near range and which one is coming from the far range. Now see what the sensor hears: continuous incoming pulses, and they will create a constant node. Now let us hear a different sound. For example, a composer is playing a piano, and from this sound we can understand that composer is moving towards up. Now see, again, now see, we can at least differentiate them, and we can count how many pulses are coming, and even we can differentiate them. This is called Doppler, a very important thing in case of synthetic aperture radar. Let us try to understand the Doppler again. Now see, the reflection from this point or from this point or from this point would not be possible to be discriminated, because along this white line all of the energies are coming at the same instant. Now we have adopted a different approach to understand this. See, oh, oh. See, the radar beam is reaching along this white line at the same instant. Therefore, which signal is coming from this location, which signal is coming from this location, which signal is coming from this location, it cannot be differentiated. And the Doppler shift concept has been adopted to understand which one is coming from which location, and whether it is from the left hand side. I mean, if we consider this one as the center, then whether it is coming from the left hand side or from the right hand side, because for this particular point and for this particular point, whether it is coming from the left hand side or whether it is coming from the right hand side is also necessary to be understand, because the distances will be same for this point and for this point. The distances will be same. Since the distances will be same, then we won't be able to discriminate them. That means we also should have some mechanism so that we can understand which one is coming from the left hand side and which one is coming from the right hand side, or which one is coming from the forward side and which one is coming from the aft side or backward side. So this is the center of the beam. This is approaching side and this is preceding side. And how we can understand? See, now we can understand that the train is approaching and train is leaving to us based on the sound. Try to hear it again. Although the train is sounding the horn at a constant pitch, but since the distance is changing from the observer, it appears like continuously increasing the pitch, and then when leaving the train, then we shall have a decrease in pitch, a continuous decrease in pitch. Try to hear it again. In different location, how it hears, how it sounds. See. And this is the basic concept of synthetic aperture radar. Now, based on this sound concept, for each and every location, we can determine the range, and accordingly, the image can be formed. Now, what will be what about the brightness of the pixel? The brightness of the pixel will ultimately depend on the size of the object, as it has been shown in this video. And the image will look like this. Now the question is, we are determining the ranges. We determine based on the ranges or based on the distances. We can also determine their locations. But what about the Earth surface features? I mean, what about the Earth surface coordinates or geographic coordinates? We also need the geographic coordinates for all of these locations. So, how precisely it can measure the locations, and how can we represent this radar image in geographic coordinates in latitude and longitude? We have adopted a technique. What is the technique? See, we have used this kind of reflectors. Differently, reflectors are used on the Earth's surface. They are manufactured with metallic surface. Metallic surface has very high dielectric properties, and they reflect almost the entire energy towards the sensor. We shall definitely discuss the dielectric property in day 2, but till now this is enough to understand that these objects can reflect the entire incoming energy, almost entire incoming energy towards the sensor, and as a result they will appear very bright on the imagery, and their locations can also be integrated with the image. So these are the objects, and for which we have the lat long, and we can georeference or we can assign geographic coordinates to the radar images. Now let us try to understand the concept of synthetic aperture radar and the azimuth resolution of synthetic aperture radar. As you can see that as we have shown you previously, that if the object is moving and then the pitch is changing, and because of this pitch change in pitch, they can be identified from where they are coming, and accordingly we can generate the picture. So as you can see, in this case, if we are moving, traveling towards a specific direction, then the frequency will be increased in that direction. So based on this concept, this is called the Doppler shift. Based on this concept, synthetic aperture radar has been generated. And as I told you that synthetic aperture radar, in case of synthetic aperture radar, a synthetic antenna has been generated with the use of a small real aperture radar, or rather a small real antenna. So let us consider this as the real antenna. So this is the real antenna, and this antenna has been synthesized to generate a larger antenna. How is it possible? See, this is the top view. For example, you are considering the top view. So this is the object and this is the beam width. And now see, if the antenna comes at point A, then it starts illuminating the object O. Then it comes at B, and then it comes at C, and then it leaves the object. So for a longer duration of time from A to C, the object can be illuminated by using a smaller antenna, and different backscatters or multiple backscatters from for each antenna location can be received by the receiver or receive antenna. And what will be the concept? I mean, how to differentiate them, how the antenna will understand that how from which location the energy was sent, and what I am receiving. So for example, the antenna is receiving a specific pulse. Now from which location it was sent, it is necessary to be determined. For example, it is receiving the this antenna is receiving the energy of this particular location. This is important for us because this range is necessary to be determined, and the image will be formed based on the ranges. So where from the energy was thrown and where from it is being received is very important. Otherwise, we won't be able to determine the ranges. So in this case, what happened? In this case, the Doppler shift concept has been used, as I have also shown in the video, and based on this concept, different locations would be identified and a synthesized antenna can be generated. Again, this is again top view. So this is the antenna and this is the beam width. Here we have the target. So the target can be illuminated for a longer duration of time by using the synthesized antenna, and all of the pulses, return and sent pulses and return pulses can be measured by using the Doppler shift, and the ranges can be determined. Now see, in case of synthetic aperture radar, see this is a three-dimensional figure. Okay, so here this is the range direction, this is the azimuth direction, and this is the Z direction. Now see, if we consider the near range, in case of near range, the object will be illuminated for a shorter duration of time, or the antenna length will be shorter. Why? Because the beam width at the near range is narrower, and at the far range the beam width is wider. So for example, I am throwing the energy from this location. So at the near range, this is the beam width. Okay, so at the far range it will be rather much wider, and wider I mean, when the object is at this location, this will come under the illumination at the far range, but at the near range, if we place the object at the same line on the same line at the near range, it will not be illuminated by the radar beam. That means for an object at the far range, we will have a longer antenna, and for an object at the near range, we will have rather shorter antenna. And see, in case of real aperture radar, what we found, that spatial resolution is finer at the near range and it is coarser at the far range. Let me come back to that slide again. This one. So the spatial resolution is finer at the near range and coarser at the far range, since beam width is wider at the far range and narrower at the near range. Now see, since in case of synthetic aperture radar, the nearer objects will be illuminated for a shorter duration of time, and the further objects will be illuminated for a longer duration of time. Therefore, spatial resolution will be higher at the far range and it will be coarser at the near range, and it will ultimately nullify the beam width effect, and throughout the swath or throughout the range direction, the spatial resolution will be constant. So this is another advantage of the synthetic aperture radar over the real aperture radar. Now azimuth resolution in case of SAR can be explained with this formula, antenna length divided by 2. Now see, that means theoretically, if we reduce the antenna length, we can achieve extremely high resolution. That means virtually we do not need any antenna. It may be a pinpoint and we can get pinpoint resolution, but it is not like that actually, you know. And also I will explain, and also another important thing you have to understand from this formula, that the azimuth resolution of synthetic aperture radar is independent of height. It is not dependent on the slant range distance as it was in case of real aperture radar. So whether we are placing it from aerial platform or from the satellite platform, we can obtain same spatial resolution, and it is dependent on the length of the antenna. Now see, how can we reduce the antenna length? Okay, the antenna length, we have to understand that the pulse length is also dependent on the antenna length. So pulse length is basically half of the antenna length. So if we reduce the uh, antenna length, then the pulse length will become shorter. Apparently, you may feel that if the pulse length becomes shorter, then we can obtain higher range resolution and it will be beneficial for us. But it is not like that, because if we reduce the pulse length, we have to go for shorter wavelengths, and shorter wavelengths is not desired. And also we have to increase the bandwidth. So wider bandwidth is also not desired. That is why a balance is maintained to design the antenna length. Now let us discuss speckle. Okay, so speckle on the radar imagery. If you have seen any radar image earlier, you might have seen that on the radar imagery we have a salt and pepper texture. That means a presence of very bright and very dark pixels side by side. This is called speckle, and this is a common phenomena in all kinds of radar image. Why it causes? It causes because of the constructive and destructive interference from multiple scattering returns. Multiple scattering means, as I told you, that when the beam hits the target, the beam is being splitted into multiple several beams, and these multiple several beams are then received by the antenna. Now different beams are coming, and these different beams will be constructed to generate a higher phase, or one beam will destruct the pulse or the phase of another beam. I'll show you. I'll show you in a greater detail, because it is difficult to explain with words, especially for those who are not from electronics. It is rather better to represent all these things in graphical manner. So let us try to understand what does it mean by in phase and out of phase. In phase and out of phase. What does it mean by phase? We shall discuss again later with a greater detail, but I would request you to watch this video to understand what does it mean by phase and what does it mean by in phase and out of phase. When the energy, I mean energy that is coming from different pulses or different backscatters, when we combine different backscatter energies, then if the phase matches, then if the phase of these different energies match, then it is called in phase, and if they do not match, then it is called out of phase. Let us see this video. It will explain what is in phase and what is out of phase.
A wave is a disturbance in some medium. Water waves are disturbances in water. Sound waves are disturbances in particles of air, water, or some solid. That's why you cannot hear your fellow astronauts scream in space. But what about light? What is its medium? Maybe it's air. But then light from the sun and distant stars reaches us, and it has to travel through the nothingness of space. We'll need to set up something like this. For this we'll need a light source, two fully reflective mirrors, a half reflective mirror. A half reflective mirror only reflects half of the light. The other half passes straight through it. We'll also need a detector which will detect the amount of light incident on it. The light source is placed at the bottom center of our setup. The half reflective mirror is placed at the center at a 45 degrees angle to the direction of light emitted from the source. The two reflective mirrors are placed at the right and at the top of our setup, making a 90-degree angle at the center. The mirrors are placed at exactly the same distance from the center. Let's emit a beam of light from the source. It will hit the half reflective mirror, which is placed at 45 degrees angle at the center of our setup. Half of the light passes through this mirror, and the other half gets reflected. The two mirrors, which are precisely at the same distance from the center mirror, reflect back the light towards the center again. Here they combine as they head to the detector. Now, the point to note is, as the mirrors are placed exactly at the same distance, the light reflected from them will reach back at the exact same instant of time, and both the waves will get added together. Let's backtrack a little and see how waves get added. The higher point in the waves are called peaks, and the lowermost points the troughs. Let's say we have two similar waves which are in phase, which mean the peaks of one wave align with the peaks of the other wave, and similarly for the troughs. When we add these two waves, the peaks get added together, and so do the troughs, giving us a wave with higher peaks and lower troughs. This is called constructive interference and will enhance the final intensity of the resulting wave. But if the two waves are out of phase, the peaks of one align with the troughs of the other, and this results in the peaks cancelling the troughs. If they exactly cancel each other, the wave is destroyed and the intensity would be zero. Anything in between, we are going to see an interference pattern whose intensity would be between the in-phase addition and the out-of-phase addition.
So I hope you can understand what is in phase and out phase. Now let us see this video. In this video, this is the light source. Here we have the half reflecting mirror, and here we have two full reflecting mirrors. We are explaining this thing with the two mirrors, since as I told you that different backscatters are coming towards the sensor, and these backscatters will be combined. So although we are using two fully reflected mirrors, but ultimately for the radar, from many locations, different backscatters will come and they will interfere with one another. And in this video, as we can see, we have maintained a constant distance from the half reflective mirror over here, and also a constant distance from the half reflective mirror over here. And now see what happens if we throw the light. Now see, if we change the distance, this is very important, that if we change the distance, distance means distance from the sensor to the target, then the phases will be altered, and accordingly the construction or destruction interference will be going on. See this video. This is the wave we are throwing, and it is coming, it is reflected back, and they are being combined. If the distance is constant, then they will be combined. If the distance is different, then the combination will not happen, rather the phases will be altered. As you can see, if the distance is changing, there will be a change over here. And see, this is very important, that the distance from the object to the target is continuously changing in our case. Why? Because the platform is continuously moving. That means the distance from the object to from the sensor to the target is not constant, and for different reflectors, or for different earth surface features or different backscatters, they will be different. And if differences occur, then what happens? See, destruction, construction, both are happening, and as a result, on the radar imagery, you will have some very bright pixels and some very dark pixels. This is a common phenomena in the radar image. Okay, so how the speckle can be suppressed? Speckles can be suppressed by using three different approaches: multi-loop processing, filtering, speckle filtering, and temporal averaging. Among these three, temporal averaging is rather inefficient. We need multiple images captured at different times, and then these images are necessary to be averaged. Therefore, it is not wise to go for the temporal averaging. Rather, we generally go for the multi-loop processing and filtering, normal speckle filtering. First, let us try to understand the multi-loop processing. In case of multi-loop processing, it has been assumed technically, electronically, it has been designed to split a beam into multiple beams. And as you can see here, this beam has been, this is the actual beam. The actual beam has been splitted into 5 different beams. Therefore, on the imagery, we will obtain 5 lines of imagery. Here I have shown only 4 anyway. So 4 lines of imageries are we are getting. Now, if we arrange this 4 pixels to generate a single pixel, then this salt and pepper effect will be minimized, or the speckle effect will be minimized. So this is the basic concept of multi-loop processing, and also in our course we shall learn how to process the SAR image for multi-loop processing. And then we have the speckle filtering. Several speckle filters are there, and even you may think of this one as a low pass filter. I mean, low pass filters that we have used on the optical images. So low pass filters or any other filters can be used to reduce the speckles. But we have to understand that while we are applying the speckle filters or the multi-loop processing, we are basically sacrificing the level of detail. I mean, the differences among the DN values will be reduced. And since we reduce the differences in pixel values among the neighboring pixels, the image may become blur, and in view of the individual object identification, we may lose some information. But if we look from overall enhancement or overall appearance of the Earth surface features, then definitely multi-loop processing and speckle filtering will give you a better result. Then also we have the temporal averaging. In case of temporal averaging, as I told you, that we capture multiple images, and then these multiple images are averaged to generate a new image, and within this new image, definitely the speckles will be reduced. Although it can produce a very good result without sacrificing the spatial detail, but because of multiple acquisition requirements, this is not widely used in application.